The crowd was swelling. Dimmy and Coase, flushed with anticipation, could feel it in their bones. This was going to be big. Pyotr was scheduled to speak outside a synagogue in Aldgate, and the procession of out-of-work laborers was to march through the streets, demanding an audience with the rabbi. Sam and Morris had already arrived, loitering near the rear of the swelling mass. They'd been told to wait another 10 minutes. More protesters were coming. Coase had made sure the press were informed. Sympathetic reporters from radical news sheets were ready to splash headlines of worker unrest across the morning pages. The timing couldn't have been better. The latest murder had struck just days before, a gruesome punctuation mark in an already simmering city. Dorset Street was still half blockaded by clueless shunters, more concerned with appearances than action. Pyotr had declared the moment perfect for a mass demonstration. It was time. With banners raised and placards bobbing, the crowd surged forward. A tide of frustration, of fury, of hunger, desperate voices echoing off soot-darkened buildings. Coase and Dimmy led from the front, shouting slogans, igniting cheers. From a shadowed vantage point, Ivan and Gabe watched, quiet, patient, predatory. They both knew the East End was a tinderbox. It needed only the right spark. A whisper here, a push there, and the mob could be flipped on its head. Gabe had watched Ivan do it before. A few well-placed lies, a planted accusation, and the mob wouldn't know who it hated. Just that it needed to hate someone. Today, Ivan would stir the embers. As Coase and Dimmy marched proudly toward Aldgate, Ivan and Gabe slipped through the back streets, whispering venom into ears, spreading deceit like smoke. Immigrants, anarchists, foreigners stealing work, traitors hiding murderers. The words didn't need to be true, they just had to travel. Passers-by began to jeer the marchers. Some joined the procession only to sneer and spit. The tension crackled, fists clenched. Pushing started. By the time the crowd reached the synagogue, the rabbi refused to listen. "This is not the time nor the place," he said firmly, shutting the doors. The marchers turned back, disheartened. But the street behind them had changed. Pyotr stood tall before the swelling crowd, his hands raised high to bring order to the chants and noise.
"Comrades, my people!"
he called out, his voice echoing across the narrow East End street.
We must not let the ruling elite grind our flesh and blood into mortar for their empires. Every drop of our sweat, every ache in our bones, every breath we take from cradle to grave is stolen to line the velvet pockets of the privileged."
A cheer broke out. Fists rose. Coase and Dimmy shouted their support from the steps behind him. Pyotr continued louder now, voice ringing with righteous fury.
"Are we not God's children too? Or are we born only to die in the cold gutters of Whitechapel, nameless and broken?"
More cheers, louder this time, chants starting to rise in rhythm.
"Our sisters sold like cattle for carnal pleasure. Our brothers starved and bent double in the factories, worked into an early grave for a day's crust."
The crowd roared, a wave of desperation, anger, and belief. Coase and Dimmy were emboldened, their eyes wide with the thrill of momentum. They didn't see what was creeping up behind it. In a shadowed alley across the street, Ivan and Gabe whispered to a gathering of rough-necked, hollow-eyed ferals, a rival mob of street-hardened brutes who lived only for violence, shanked teeth, split knuckles, men with nothing to lose and no ideals to fight for. They didn't care about politics. They didn't care about revolution. They came for one thing, to hurt someone. And as Pyotr's voice rose to a crescendo, the crowd unaware, Ivan gave a quiet nod. This was it, the chaos the gentleman had asked for, the spark to drown the anarchist cause in blood and blame. The scum, after all, needed to be reminded of their place. Now the counter-protesters followed, angry, frothing, reinforced by the so-called Vigilance Committee. Local vigilantes with fists like bricks and minds clouded by drink and dogma. As the marchers returned to Berners Street and the International Workers' Club, the counter-crowd grew more agitated. They didn't even remember what had triggered their rage. It didn't matter now. The anger was general. A shapeless howl against everything. Immigration, anarchists, the murders, the poverty, the stink of East End failure. Bricks smashed against the club windows, bottles followed, shouts turned into threats. The marchers hurried inside, bolting the doors, but it was no use. The mob, stirred to a frenzy by Ivan's whispers, now had a target. They didn't want justice, they wanted blood. Coase and Dimmy stood inside the shattered remnants of the Workers' Club, seething. What the hell was happening? The rally, carefully planned, passionately assembled, had been twisted into a grotesque farce. Outside, a mob boiled with hate, banging fists on walls, hurling bricks and slurs with equal venom. Whatever the cause had once been, it was lost now, drowned beneath a tide of ignorance, fear, and manufactured rage. There were forces at play. Coase was certain of it. Maligned, hidden, deliberate. The truth no longer mattered. Lies had spread like wildfire, and the fire had caught. Their match, lit in hopes of exposing injustice, igniting reform, tearing the sweatshop system from its rotting roots, had turned to ash. This was no longer protest. This was tribal war. The combatants outside weren't driven by ideals. They didn't care about socialism or labor rights or revolution. They were fueled by something far more dangerous, their own misery, their own hunger, their own hate. And someone had pointed them like a loaded pistol. Coase was incandescent with fury. Spittle flew from his lips as he shouted curses in 3 languages. His fists clenched, his chest heaved. Then he made for the door. Morris grabbed him roughly by the shoulder and yanked him back. Coase wasn't about to listen. His rage boiled over, and no word of caution could hold him back. Dimmy, just as incensed, charged after him without a second thought. And Dimmy's wife, wild-eyed, half-drunk, shouting curses in slurred Yiddish, followed them both, fists clenched, fury unrestrained. The door flew open. They stormed out into the street, ready to fight. Morris cursed and spat.
Bloody fools.
Still, something in him snapped too. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was loyalty. Maybe it was just that Whitechapel madness, that need to swing when the world pushed too hard.
What the hell? Let's go.
He, Sam, and 2 others surged after them, and then all hell broke loose. Fists, boots, bottles, teeth. The street became a melee of flesh and fury. Bricks flew, screams rose, blood spilled. The mob roared like a beast unleashed. For a moment, there was nothing but violence. A haze of grunts, screams, broken glass, and the copper tang of blood in the throat. It was over as quickly as it began. Coase and Dimmy were on the ground, pinned under the boots of uniformed shunters. Arms wrenched behind their backs, blood on their faces, breath ragged. Someone, maybe Morris, maybe Sam, had vanished in the chaos. The last thing Dimmy remembered before being hauled down the cobbled street toward Lehman Street was the cracked voice of his wife screaming his name through the fog, and the cruel sound of laughter in the distance. Ivan's work was done.
Caleb sat in the dark of his tiny, damp room, perched on the creaking frame that passed for a bed. The mattress beneath him was stained, sagging, and had seen more strangers than he cared to think about over the years. The stink of mildew clung to the walls like rot. He drank from a bottle, wincing each time the liquid touched the split in his lip. His whole head throbbed, numb on one side, piercing pain on the other, and a dull, dragging ache at the top of his neck. It felt like a hangover wrapped in a beating. The night before was mostly a blur. He'd gone to the 10 Bells, drinking to Mary Jane's memory, but somewhere along the way, he'd got into it with a couple of other blokes. He couldn't remember what it was about. Probably nothing. Just the kind of thing that happened when too much booze met too much grief. The next thing he knew, he was waking up in the gutter with bruised ribs, a pounding skull, and blood dried at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't the first time. Back in his younger, wilder days, it had been a regular pattern. Get low, drink hard, pick a fight with someone twice his size, and let the world punish him like he thought it ought to. He hated his life, hated himself, hated the way everything he touched eventually turned to shit. Sometimes he'd lie there and wonder if it wouldn't have been better if he'd been drowned at birth. Sure, there had been a few good moments, but too few, too far between, and never built to last. Life was just survival, one day to the next. Something usually turned up, it was true, but it always eventually turned to shit. Pharaoh, his best mate, the only real constant, was gone now. The girl he once loved when he was young had left him for another man, and he'd never really recovered from that. Even Mary Jane, wild and doomed, had scratched something loose inside him. He knew nothing would have ever come of it. They were both too fucked up to make anything last. But she'd made him laugh once or twice. And now she was gone too. Their little criminal escapades, those chaotic, reckless nights, had been brief flashes of something more, moments in time, gone now. And with no future and a past too painful to linger on, it was those fleeting glimpses of connection, of something other than misery that kept him going. He lay there with his head pounding, his ribs aching, and his heart quietly breaking. Would there be more moments? More chances to feel something that didn't make him want to disappear? Maybe. Things had a way of turning up when you least expected. He took another swig from the bottle, set it down carefully on the uneven floorboards, and let himself drift into sleep, swallowed by the damp, suffocating dark.
Caleb woke with a start. His head throbbed worse than before, and his ribs made him wince as he tried to sit up. Then it came back to him, the argument, the cause of his battered state. Two geezers in the 10 Bells had been mouthing off about Mary Jane, saying the last time they saw her, she was with a bloke down Commercial Street. They swore it was Tommy Slade. She'd also been drinking in the Black Swan and had kicked off in there, apparently. The two men weren't exactly kind in their gossip. Said Mary Jane used to hire out double beds in the lodging houses and along the Radcliffe Highway to service punters. One of them sneered that the whore was asking for it. Caleb had snapped. Now he remembered it all, clear as day. The Slade brothers had been nothing but poison since the day they'd turned up. And now Caleb wasn't just convinced, they were involved. He was incandescent with rage. Like a man possessed, he charged through the bustle of Whitechapel. The noise, the stink, the shout of hawkers and clatter of horses, it couldn't drown out the fury boiling inside. He stormed into Macca's Chandler's and barked at Beth behind the counter.
Macca about?
She gestured out back. Macca sat on a crate, smoking a fag, lost in thought.
All right, Caleb.
He could see straight away Caleb wasn't. His face told the story.
What's troubling you?
Caleb was breathing hard.
What do you think?
Macca sighed, stubbing out his cigarette.
No good beating yourself up, mate. I just had Barney in here, stuttering like mad, blaming himself. He was a bit off, to be honest, but then, I suppose he always was.
Don't you care?
Caleb snapped. Macca glared.
Fuck off, Caleb. What do you want me to do? Trust me, I've done nothing but scour this fucking town for answers these last 2 days, while you've been drowning yourself in booze and picking fights with every poor sod you bump into, so don't come at me like that.
It wasn't over nothing. Those two geezers at the Bells last night reckon it was Tommy Slade.
Macca paused, brow furrowed. He didn't respond immediately. Caleb didn't wait.
I want a gun. I'm going down there and I'm going to shoot the cunt.
Macca laughed coldly.
You're a cowboy now, are you? Hang on there, Billy the fucking kid.
He went to the back door and shouted into the yard.
Harry!
Harry, unloading crates from a wagon, appeared in the stockroom.
Macca?
Macca turned to him.
What did you tell me about Jacko and Tommy Slade the other day?
Yeah, right. So, you know what Mary Jane could be like after a few gins? It was, I think, the night after she kicked Barney out. She was drinking in the Black Swan. Got a bit lippy with Tommy. Him and Jacko had words. Ivan was there too. I heard Jacko took a beating, and Mary Jane got booted out. But not before Tommy told her. You're in for it, or something like that.
Macca and Caleb shared a look.
I fucking told you it was him, and
Caleb said, chest heaving. Harry spoke up again.
Thing is, no one's seen Tommy since.
Since when?
Macca asked sharply.
Well, since that morning.
Macca stood, silent for a beat, then said flatly,
That doesn't mean anything.
Caleb stepped forward, rage renewed.
give me a fucking gun, Macca.
Macca snapped.
You're not getting a fucking gun, Caleb, I just said. It don't mean shit. We're already in enough bother over what happened at the Shunter's Palace the other night.
Give me a gun.
Are you deaf or fucking stupid?
Or why not?
Why not? This ain't the wild fucking West. And I've got it from the right people. The Slades are connected.
But he's the fucking Ripper.
Macca stepped in close.
You've had too hard a knock on the head, Caleb. I'm telling you, calm the fuck down. I've had words in the right ears. This killer's going to be sorted. And it ain't Tommy Slade.
Harry cut in again, uncertain.
How do you know that, boss?
Macca turned on him sharp.
Don't you fucking start.
Sorry, Guff.
Harry said quickly, backing off. Macca walked to the shop door, then turned back.
You.
He said, pointing at Harry.
Finish unloading the stock. And you.
He pointed at Caleb.
Go home. Sleep it off. Come back tomorrow. I'll have work for you.
He stormed out. Caleb stood there, chest still heaving, eyes full of fire. Harry gave a crooked smile.
I know how you feel, mate. The Slades are bad news. This all started when they turned up.
Caleb looked at him.
You think they're responsible?
Harry shrugged.
I don't know, mate.
He turned to leave, but as he passed the corner, he pulled back a tarpaulin covering a box, just enough for Caleb to see the glint of cold metal underneath. The same gun Macca had sold to Murph. Harry didn't look back, but he knew Caleb had seen it.
Caleb had his blood up now. Adrenaline surged through him. The rights and wrongs of what he was about to do never even entered his head. Success or failure didn't matter, only the act itself. Single-minded, locked in, possessed. His veins throbbed with purpose, with fury, with something close to life for the first time in months. He had crossed a line. No more doubt, no more reason. Only rage, only revenge. The adrenaline surge had wiped out every other thought in Caleb's head. There was no room for fear, doubt, or consequence. His mind was fixed, his body locked into purpose. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt alive, truly, vividly alive. He passed the Black Swan. The lamps hadn't been lit yet and the door hung half open. He glanced inside. Not the usual girl behind the bar. Not Tommy's woman. Someone else. He didn't care. He liked her, sure, but that wasn't what he was here for, not now. He moved on, slipping round the side into the tradesman's yard, boots crunching quietly on the gritty cobbles. His luck was in. Gabe was there, hunched over a crate, lighting a cigarette. And beside him, broader shoulders, slick dark hair, was a bigger man. Caleb froze. It had to be Tommy. From behind he couldn't be sure, but his gut told him, and right now gut feeling was everything. Caleb stepped out, hand shaking but steady enough, and leveled the gun square at Gabe. At first, Gabe didn't clock it, busy striking a match. But when he looked up and saw the iron in Caleb's grip, he stiffened. Wordlessly, he gave a nod to the man beside him. Even. Ivan turned, calm as anything, and when he saw Caleb aiming the pistol, he broke into a slow, wolfish grin.
Caleb?
Caleb blinked, taken slightly aback. He hadn't expected Ivan. Not here.
Ivan, you should make your mind up whose side you're on.
Ivan gave a dry chuckle.
I do. I don't follow no cunt. I'm on my side, whoever pays.
Figures.
Caleb didn't look at him again. The barrel stayed fixed on Gabe.
Where's Tommy?
Gabe scowled.
What's it to you?
He's the Ripper.
Gabe's grin vanished. His face turned cold.
How do you make that out, bright boy?
It all started when you two turned up.
Gabe glared at him.
I don't find that particularly funny. Tommy's dead.
Ivan cut in again, the smirk returning, voice soaked in mockery.
That's right, Caleb. Dead before your girly friend got chopped.
Caleb's grip on the pistol tightened. His breath caught.
Yeah, I'm supposed to believe you're not hiding him somewhere.
Ivan and Gabe shared a look.
You always were a thick cunt, Caleb.
Ivan sneered.
Just like Pharaoh. You pick shit friends, you know that. You're a Jonah. Bad luck follows you around.
Caleb's jaw clenched. His finger curled around the trigger. The safety clicked. Out of sight, Gabe's fingers closed around a crowbar.
Thick fucker.
Ivan sneered again.
Typical, Caleb. Just walking disaster.
Caleb swung the pistol at him.
Better than being a twisted, evil cunt like you.
That's when Gabe moved. Fast, crowbar raised. But Caleb was faster. Bang! Bang! 2 shots. Point blank. Gabe's chest exploded red. He crashed backwards onto the cobbles, the crowbar clattering from his limp hand. Caleb turned, but Ivan was gone. Just a faint scuff of boots and a flutter of coattails. He fired anyway. Crack! The shot blew a chunk out of the wooden stanchion where Ivan had been. Silence now, except for Caleb's breathing. He stared down at Gabe's body, then turned and ran. Time to vanish before Whitechapel swallowed him too.
Lucy was at a loss. She'd never been homeless before. As a young girl, she'd gone straight from her family home into service. Maid to a wealthy family. Grueling hours, a shared bed with another girl and few comforts, but it meant a roof over her head and regular meals. Then came her husband, briefly, and then his sudden, unexplained death while she was with child. Then Tommy, and the miscarriage. She never could quite remember how it happened. A fall down the stairs, she thought. Or maybe she'd been pushed. She couldn't recall. Tommy hadn't seemed too upset about it, though. In fact, he'd looked almost relieved. Now she was out on the streets, cold, wet, exhausted, penniless, and no home, no protection, no plan. What was she to do? She'd never walked the streets, never been on the game before. But she knew full well its dangers. Syphilis was rampant, and that wasn't even to mention the Ripper or the other men, the worst kind, opportunistic and callous. She had to toughen up, fast. Tommy had worn her down, made her quiet, servile, meek, a ghost of the girl she'd once been. And the streets of Whitechapel had no place for ghosts. She tried everything she could think of. Went from pub to pub, asking after bar work, scullery jobs, even laundry. But she was met with tired eyes and closed doors. Everyone needed the same work. There was none going spare. Eventually, desperate, she joined the queue at the casual workhouse, the Spike. They said if you queued early enough, you might get in by 6. She didn't know what to expect, but she didn't expect that. They searched her, stripped her, right down to bare skin, and gave her a cold bath in water so filthy she was certain she came out dirtier than she went in. No towel, no dignity, just shit-stained stiff workhouse clothes tossed at her by a sneering matron. The food, or what passed for it, was skilly, a watered-down oatmeal, tasteless and sour. There was salt in the middle of the table, but the heap looked like it had been clawed at by every filthy hand in East London. She was starving, but it appeared not quite starving enough yet. It was so foul she didn't finish it all, but one of the other girls didn't hesitate to wolf the leftovers down. Then the bed, if you could call it that. A room of 30 wooden boxes, packed tight like coffins, filled with straw and fleas. Every bite on God's earth living in that straw, and every sound of suffering echoing through the room, coughs, groans, snores, and the occasional scream that pierced through the blackness. Lucy lay still, listening. One woman muttered through a nightmare, writhing in her box. Lucy wondered what she was dreaming about. She thought of Mary Jane, of the gin, the laughter in the pub, the jokes, the music, the warmth. She missed that now. Missed it more than she ever thought possible. She finally began to drift. Then something scurried across her foot. She screamed. A rat. The woman next to her sat up, eyes glinting in the dark.
"Shut the fuck up!"
she hissed.
"Or I'll give you something to fucking scream about."
Lucy said nothing, just curled tighter in the box. Sleep came eventually, until the matron came in like a storm, yanked her up, shoved her along. Time for work. 10 hours of picking oakum, teasing apart old ropes with her fingers until they bled. Lucy had never done it before. Halfway through, she was certain she never would again. But then she heard. Everyone said that. Finally, mercifully, she was spat out the other end. Her own clothes returned. Filthy, damp, worse than before. And her freedom. if you could call it that. She staggered out into the street, no stronger, no wiser, just colder, hungrier, more exhausted, and more alone than ever. She stood there in the bleak Whitechapel morning, the fog rising up like a spectre, and whispered, "What now?"
Lucy waited on the corner. It was late. Too late for the spike, and too cold and too exhausted to carry the banner again. Her legs ached from sleeping earlier on the damp grass of Itchy Park. She hadn't dared the game yet, had resisted it so far. But there was a reason there were so few women in that park, and that reason was the same one that now had her standing under a sputtering gaslight, waiting. She didn't have to wait long. She was still relatively young, still had most of her youthful, fresh-faced good looks. That counted for something. It was down a dark, stinking alley she went with the German sailor. He didn't speak much English, but his intent was obvious. Lucy had asked for 2 shillings, and he'd handed them over without complaint. She thought later that she could have asked for more. The act was quick, a mild discomfort, little different to what she'd endured with Tommy. The real offense was the stench, sweat, fish, something sour and rotting. It clung to her skin and gagged her more than the act itself. But a line had been crossed. 2 shillings clinked in her palm, and when she stepped into the 10 bells, the warm, smoky air swallowed her whole. The crowd was loud and lewd, full of singing and slurring and spilled ale. She threw back a drink, then another. The sting of gin bit into her chest, and a smile found her lips. The noise filled her hollow places. For a fleeting moment, she didn't feel so lost. It didn't last. A feral-looking thug had seen her, watched her, waited. As she left the pub on her way to a lodging house, he cornered her in a narrow cut-through and punched her hard in the stomach. The wind and coins were knocked out of her in the same breath. He didn't even run, just grinned and walked off. People had seen it happen. No one stepped in. She spent another night on the streets, doubled in pain, penniless again, and this time more scared than ever. The next day she queued once more outside the spike, against her better judgment. Just one more night, she told herself. Just one more, until I find something, anything else. Her body was aching. The punch still throbbed, her belly hollow, her limbs so tired they felt like they no longer belonged to her. She cursed herself for spending those 2 shillings on drink instead of food. She wouldn't do that again. Never. Leaning against the cold stone wall, waiting her turn in the queue, she noticed someone watching her. A man approached, quiet, cautious. She recognized him, Caleb, Mary Jane's friend, the girl who'd been murdered.
Lucy offered a meek greeting.
"Hello?"
Caleb blinked, unsure at first if it was her.
You all right?
She shrugged and gave a small nod.
How come you're here?
He asked, eyes scanning the queue. Lucy tried to smile.
"I'm waiting to get in."
She gestured toward the door of the casual ward.
How come?
She gave him a look.
"Why do you think?"
Caleb looked apologetic, lowering his voice.
I meant, what happened to the pub?
"I got chucked out."
Lucy said, her voice low.
"Didn't you hear about my husband?"
Caleb shook his head.
"He's dead, and his brother threw me out not long after."
Caleb's brow creased.
That's a bit unfair.
Lucy nodded faintly.
"It's a long story, really."
He was a bastard anyway, wasn't he?
Lucy gave another shrug.
"Some days."
A silence hung between them, awkward but not unfriendly.
How long you been on the streets?
"Over a week."
Caleb looked up the line. The gaunt faces, the stink of defeat hanging over the crowd. He knew too well the kind of misery that clung to a person out here, the soul-numbing anguish of queuing for the spike. He'd always turned to skullduggery before letting himself sink that low. And most women, especially those still as youthful as Lucy, found other ways to survive. The fact she was standing here said something he respected.
You hungry?
She nodded.
"Starving."
Come back to mine. I've got some fish.
She hesitated, then nodded.
"All right, thank you."
Not a problem.
They walked in silence, the occasional murmur passing between them. A few words here and there, small, meaningless at first, but something started to shift in the quiet. Caleb's room was stark, bare floorboards, thin walls, damp air, but compared to the filth and cruelty of the workhouse, it might as well have been a palace. They shared the fish and a small, wrinkled potato. Caleb handed her a bottle of beer, and she took it gratefully. The warmth from the fire, such as it was, crept into her bones. Caleb touched Lucy's hand. The softness sent a glow of warmth through his body, a warmth he could never remember feeling in a long time. They sat in front of the fire, and after a while they snuggled together. Even though they didn't know each other that well, it was a bit of association by convenience, but that's the way it often worked in the misery of the slums.
The gentleman sat back in the deep leather chair of his club, wrapped in the quiet hush of polished wood, old books, and murmured conversation. A fire crackled low in the hearth. He savoured his cigar, the smoke curling like silk in the lamplight. The concierge approached silently, bowed with practiced grace, and extended a folded note on a silver tray. The gentleman accepted it without a word, nodding faintly. From his waistcoat pocket, he drew a coin and passed it over. The concierge offered a soft
Thank you, sir.
and withdrew. The gentleman didn't open the note immediately. He took another slow draw on his cigar. The glow lit the edge of his face, but his eyes remained lost in thought, fixed on nothing in particular. Then, with the barest sigh, he broke the seal. As the gentleman read the note, he was joined by the second gentleman. He sat in the leather chair opposite, and the first gentleman passed the note across. The second gentleman read it, his brows lifting.
Unfortunate, yes,
said the first.
but not unexpected.
The second considered a moment.
Then the response must be reasonable and proportionate.
The first gentleman smiled slowly, the corners of his mouth barely moving.
Of course, reasonable and proportionate. Obviously, we needed someone more reliable.
The second gentleman nodded.
That can be arranged.
They both laughed, softly. A ripple of disapproval spread through the room. A glance from over a newspaper here, a slight tilt of the head there, but no one dared say a word.
The gentleman sat alone in his carriage as it rolled slowly over the bridge, the muffled clatter of hooves echoing through the damp night. It came to a gentle stop. A moment passed. Then the door opened, and two men climbed in. Rough, broad-shouldered types with the weathered faces and coiled stillness of men who'd seen too much war. Veterans of Afghanistan by their bearing, hard men. The gentleman offered a polite nod. Silent, expression unreadable. He reached into his coat and produced a folded sheet of headed paper, passing it across without a word. One of the ex-soldiers opened it, eyes scanning the contents. After a beat, he gave a sharp nod and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. The gentleman met his gaze, returned the nod. Without a word spoken, the two men stepped back out into the night. The gentleman tapped the roof of the carriage with his cane. The carriage rolled on, vanishing into the fog.
Mickey stood behind the bar of the Black Swan, talking low to the new barmaid. Both looked uneasy.
What do we do?
She asked, glancing at the quiet room. Mickey shrugged.
No one told me nothing. Gabe and Tommy sorted everything. Can't even ask Lucy.
The barmaid leaned in, voice lowered.
What happened to her?
Mickey shook his head.
No idea. She just stopped showing.
Before either could say more, the doors swung open. 4 imposing men and 2 full-figured women entered like they owned the place. The first 2 men, hard-faced and broad-shouldered, were unmistakably ex-soldiers, the very same the gentleman had entertained in his carriage. They strode up to the bar. The lead man gave Mickey and the barmaid a slow once-over.
"Who are you?"
he asked, with all the warmth of a debt collector. Mickey straightened, trying not to show nerves.
I'm the doorman. She's the barmaid.
The ex-soldier cracked a cold smile, nodded to his companion, and stepped to the till. He popped it open, fished out 2 shillings, and tossed them on the bar. 1 to Mickey, 1 to the girl.
Not anymore.
The barmaid looked at the coin.
A shilling.
Be thankful you got that,
the man said, already turning away.
Now fuck off.
Mickey held his tongue. He was a hard East Ender, but this lot were harder, and he'd seen what happened to lads who pushed back. Without another word, he and the girl collected their things and left. The Black Swan was under new management.
Macca strode down Ship's Alley, boots echoing off the damp cobbles as he made his way toward a secluded dock just off the Ratcliffe Highway. The night air was thick with smoke and salt, the shadows deep and full of menace. He passed a row of narrow, foul-smelling alleys and shuttered drinking dens where the wrong word could get a man gutted. At the entrance to the dockyard, he paused. A quick glance over his shoulder. No one followed, no eyes in the dark. Then he slipped inside. At the far end of a weather-beaten wooden quay stood 4 men, silhouetted in the gloom. All wore long coats and dark hats, suited for a chilly late November night. Joseph and Abraham were there, flanked by Lusky and another bloke, thick-set with a battered face and the vacant look of hired muscle, likely one of the Vigilance Committee's dirtier acquisitions. Macca gave a brief nod as he approached. They nodded back, the atmosphere quiet but taut.
What's this all about, Joseph?
Macca asked, low and guarded. Joseph said nothing. He gestured toward a large bundle lying on the dock, half covered in rough sacking cloth. It shifted. Macca's eyes narrowed.
Nice big catch,
he muttered, still not grasping the full meaning.
It's what you asked for,
Abraham said flatly. Macca looked from Abraham to Joseph, then down at the wriggling sack. His face hardened. He stepped closer.
Serious?
Macca asked, his voice shifting, now just as grim as the others. Joseph nodded. Macca took a breath, then another, his eyes fixed on the large bundle. It was lashed tight at both ends with thick naval rope. He stared at it for a moment, piecing it all together. The realization hit him in the gut. Suddenly he stepped forward and delivered 3, maybe 4 brutal kicks to the sack. The figure inside groaned in agony but couldn't scream, tightly gagged, muffled by the heavy cloth. Abraham and Lusky rushed to pull Macca back. He didn't fight them, but he spat a string of vicious curses, fury pouring out of him. Held firm by the 2 vigilance men, Macca turned to Joseph.
Where'd you find him?
Joseph gave a casual shrug.
Not important.
Oh no?
Macca growled.
No.
Joseph repeated, eyes cold.
What are you gonna do with him?
Joseph was calm.
Deal with him in-house, like we always do. You said it yourself. We can't rely on the authorities. Too much corruption, too much prejudice.
Macca's jaw tensed.
What does that mean?
Abraham stepped in, grinning darkly.
Means we're gonna drown the little fucker.
How?
Macca's rage and dread were mounting.
How do you think?
Joseph replied dryly.
You even sure it's him?
Oh, it's him,
Abraham said with certainty.
After tonight, Macca, there will be no more Ripper murders. You can be sure of that.
At that, Joseph gave the signal. Lusky and the bruiser grabbed the wriggling sack and hauled it down the stone steps to a waiting rowboat. Macca watched in silence, breath hard and shallow. The 2 men rowed out to the middle of the river, the moon glinting off the black water. With no ceremony, they shoved the weighted sack overboard. It hit with a heavy splash and vanished beneath the surface, swallowed by the Thames without a trace. A few minutes later, the boat returned to the quay. Joseph turned to Macca.
It's over. You got what you wanted.
Macca looked at him long and hard, then shook his head slowly.
Nah,
he said.
That should have been done months ago.
Joseph and Abraham exchanged a look, but said nothing. Without another word, Macca turned and walked away into the night.
The shunters were more baffled than ever. Patrols had been increased tenfold. Sir Charles Warren had resigned as police commissioner. A royal pardon for anyone with information had been plastered across every news sheet, broadsheet, and alley wall. Even the Queen had commented, yet still, nothing. No witnesses, no confessions, no killer. Aberline, Reed, Walt, and the others had held crisis meeting after crisis meeting in the smoke-thick muster room of Lehman Street, and each ended the same way, in exhausted, frustrated silence. One afternoon, in one of those silences, Johnny Upright quietly requested a private word with Aberline. They moved to Reed's office, shut the door. Billy stood with his cap in hand.
I've got it on good authority,
he said flatly.
He's dead.
Aberline narrowed his eyes.
How would you know?
Johnny Upright met his gaze without flinching.
Come on, Gov, you know the streets. When there's a problem, sometimes it gets sorted. Even you know that.
Aberline's tone sharpened.
How much are you involved in such activities, Billy?
Johnny gave a thin smile.
Don't be naive, Gov. You worked down here long enough.
Aberline's glare hardened, but inside, he knew Billy was telling the truth. Or at least what passed for it in Whitechapel. He'd heard the whispers. Some of the boys on the take. Quiet deals. Rough justice. That's just the way it was.
I just hope to God you're right,
Aberline muttered. Johnny Upright nodded once, and without another word, he turned and left the room, leaving Aberline alone in the heavy silence. For all his doubts, Aberline couldn't help but believe him, and he wasn't the only one.
Caleb sat still before the fire, its glow fading to the last stubborn embers. The room was quiet, almost too quiet, save for the soft creak of the old floorboards and the occasional pop from the dying coals. Lucy stepped in, a loaf of bread cradled in her arms. She paused when she saw him, motionless, his face half shadowed by the orange light. She still wasn't sure what to make of him. He wasn't unkind, but something always seemed to simmer beneath his surface.
You all right?
She asked cautiously. Caleb didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the hearth, like he was staring into something that wasn't there. Finally, he looked up and gave a slight nod.
Yeah, I'm okay.
He noticed the bread and gave a faint smile.
Glad you got some. I could do with a nosh. Shame the fire's on its way out.
Lucy nodded, relieved that he was still speaking gently. She tightened her shawl and moved across the room.
I'll get it going again. Make us some toast if you like.
Caleb gave a tired smile and nodded again, then returned his gaze to the embers. She placed the bread on the rickety old table, then knelt beside the hearth. With practiced hands, she coaxed the fire back to life, adding dry kindling and blowing softly until the flames caught. The fire crackled into motion, lighting her face. She looked at him from the corner of her eye. He caught it and gave another brief smile.
You seem a bit quiet this morning.
He exhaled slowly.
Bit of business earlier. Worn out, I suppose.
Lucy gave a small nod, deciding not to press him. Whatever that business was, she guessed it wasn't something she wanted to hear in detail. They sat in silence for a while, the fire warming the room once more. Lucy slid a slice of bread onto the toasting fork and held it near the flames, the smell of browning crust slowly rising between them. It wasn't much, but for now it was something like peace. Caleb had been unusually quiet, lost in his thoughts. Lucy had wondered why, but truthfully, she still didn't know if this was just how he was. It would take time to understand him, to know what lay behind those long silences. Still, he was company, rough company maybe, but better than the cruel solitude the streets often served. He'd given her a shilling earlier, and she'd offered to fetch some beer. Caleb hadn't seemed keen to step outside, his reluctance plain. So Lucy had wrapped herself up, braced for the cold, and slipped out into the dark. The alleyway outside was slick with damp, the air thick with fog and coal smoke. She moved quickly, feet tapping the wet cobblestones, vanishing around the corner with a sense of purpose and a slight spring in her step. She hadn't noticed the eyes watching her from across the way, didn't see the shadow detach from the bricks and slink into movement. The figure stepped forward, silent, sure and wrong. A feral presence, hunched and grimy, eyes gleaming beneath a battered military cap. An ex-soldier, one of the brutal kind, who'd brought the worst of the war home with him. He wasn't here for beer. He was here for business, the kind of business he liked best. And Lucy had just left the door wide open.
Lucy hugged the 2 bottles of beer to her chest as she picked her way over the slick cobbles and through the smoke-thick alleys back to Caleb's grim little hovel. It wasn't ideal, far from it. But at least with Caleb, she didn't have to sleep with one eye open, wondering if Tommy's temper would explode. She missed the security of the pub, the regular meals, the warmth. But she'd learned not to expect comfort. Beggars, after all, didn't get to choose. As she turned into the alley, she stopped. The door was open. She was certain she'd shut it. Her heart skipped. Maybe Caleb had gone out after all. She stepped closer and gave a tentative,
"Hello?"
No answer. She entered cautiously and staggered back against the damp wall with a sharp gasp. Her knees buckled slightly, one hand catching her against the bricks. Caleb lay crumpled on the bed, bloodied, broken, motionless. Her stomach turned. The bottles clinked gently in her arms as she approached, her breath catching in her throat. She placed them down on the rickety table without thinking, hands trembling. Kneeling beside him, she reached out and touched his forehead. Still warm. But he was gone. His face was a mess. His legs mangled. Whoever had done this hadn't just meant to kill him, they'd wanted him to suffer. She stared at him a moment longer, then closed her eyes and sat back on her heels. For a long moment, there was only silence. No sobs, no screams. Just the damp air, the echo of dripping somewhere beyond the wall, and the dull roar of her heart thudding in her ears. Why? Why did life only ever offer grief? Why did every path lead back to pain, to loss, to darkness? She rose slowly, unsteady on her feet. The room seemed to shrink around her. The fire had long since died. There was no point calling the shunters. What would they do? Blame Caleb, blame her, blame the drink. Lucy didn't want revenge, she didn't want justice, she just wanted out. Out of the struggle, out of the streets, out of the endless descent into hell. Without another look, she walked out of Caleb's door for the last time and vanished into the shadows of Whitechapel, drifting deeper into the depths of despair.
The room was thick with cigar smoke, the air heavy but calm. It was neutral ground, somewhere discreet, expensive, and away from the street stink of Whitechapel. Only the best leather chairs lined the table, a perfect meeting spot for men who preferred power brokered in comfort. Abraham and Lusky stood close behind Joseph, their eyes scanning every movement. Two of the tougher Vigilance Committee lads lingered at the back wall, rigid and watchful. Opposite sat the two elegant English gentlemen, serene in posture, pristine in their tailored suits. Behind them, the two ex-soldiers who now ran the Black Swan loomed with quiet intimidation. Drinks were poured, measured words spoken, business was discussed, terms were drawn up. In the end, it was agreed. Whitechapel would be divided. Profits, legitimate and ill-gotten, would be shared. Each interest would hold its ground, and a balance would be struck between them. No more open war, no more chaos, just a calm menace, a quiet control. The ink dried on the agreement and glasses were raised. Peace for now.
The steamer ploughed through the grey Atlantic, its iron hull slicing the waves with relentless purpose. Behind it, the sea churned in a long, foaming wake, stretching like a ghostly tether to the world left behind. On the starboard deck, a lone figure stood braced against the wind, coat collar turned up, eyes fixed on the horizon. The cold Atlantic air bit at his face, but he didn't seem to mind. There was a smile, not of joy, but of quiet, smug satisfaction. Ivan. His past lay in tatters behind him. Broken bodies, bloodied streets, and a trail of chaos that others would mop up, explain away, or bury deep. And now the slate was clean, or at least out of reach. Ahead, the new world beckoned, a land of opportunity, of vice, of reinvention. For a man like Ivan, gifted in violence, fluent in fear, and morally bankrupt, the possibilities were endless. Anything was possible, and everything was likely.
Lucy Slade stood in the queue. The clock had just chimed 3. The spike wouldn't open for hours yet. She glanced along the line, eyes dull, body aching. A familiar knot of dread twisted in her gut. The crushing weight of hopelessness pressed down on her chest. What next, she thought. Is this it? How the hell was she supposed to escape her misery now? At her age, the pubs wanted younger barmaids. She couldn't sew for toffee, and she'd seen firsthand the ruin of the Matchbox girls, even now with all the talk of better conditions. She stared at the queue ahead. She'd spent the last 2 nights carrying the banner and, God help her, even turned a couple of tricks in the dark alleys behind the docks to sailors. No different from Tommy, really, except for the coin. A single shilling she'd earned, spent at Ringer's in a vain effort to numb the pain. It hadn't worked. Now here she was, staring down the shame of the spike. The dread came hard like one of Tommy's fists. Whether she realized it or not, whether it was a conscious choice or something darker buried deep, Lucy suddenly found herself on the bridge, staring out over the river. 2 policemen stood nearby, stationed on the bridge. They'd seen this scene 100 times. One of them called out,
"Oi, miss!"
She didn't respond. The constables began to move toward her. But a great, horse-drawn omnibus clattered between them, momentarily blocking their view. When it passed, they picked up their pace, but Lucy was gone. They scanned the length of the bridge. Nothing. They exchanged a look, shrugged. One stepped to the edge and peered down into the Thames, into the churning grey where Lucy had stood. Nothing but water and the city's filth.
"You don't think she—"
One began. The other gave him a look.
"What do you think?"
They shrugged again and returned to their post.
Dorset Street, Whitechapel, East End of London, 1888. Macca walked through the narrow archway into Miller's Court. He made his way to the back of the yard and climbed the worn steps to the upper rooms. He knocked. A woman in her 30s opened the door.
"Hello, Macca,"
she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips as she handed him 4 shillings and 6pence. Macca took the money and nodded.
"You been busy?"
he asked. She shrugged.
"You know how it is. Bit of this, bit of that. Whatever I have to."
Macca gave her a small, sympathetic smile.
"Yeah."
She closed the door and he turned, heading back down the steps. He walked the length of the court and paused outside the blockaded door of number 13. He stood there for a moment, thinking of the previous occupant. A flicker of sadness crossed his face. Then he moved on, back through the archway, and stopped at the door of his chandlery. He looked up Dorset Street, then down, taking in all its to and fro, the clatter of boots, the muttered curses, the endless hustle of the desperate and the damned. Life grinding on in its usual way. He lowered his gaze and stepped inside. The door shut behind him with a clatter. Dorset Street, Whitechapel, London itself, carried on in its own inevitable way, surviving or not. The same old dance, day to day.